The enlightenment of man is in his bodily commitment to life. Man is mortal and also immortal. The individual apparently lives and dies, but his existence is not threatened. His psychophysical form passes through cycles of birth and change and death, but each cycle is followed by another, so that all the evolutionary lessons may be learned. This is the understanding that enlightens our perception of man. But unenlightened men and women do not perceive or understand the paradox of man and the immortality of the cycles of mortality. Therefore, the usual individual is full of self and fear, and he constantly seeks to protect himself against ultimate and apparently absolute threats to his survival. And because of his self-possessed search for immunity from frustration, pain, and death, the human individual fails to surrender to the full cycle of his own existence. Therefore, unenlightened man lives recoiled from his own bodily destiny. Indeed, he lives recoiled from the principle in which the body is arising. That principle is the all-pervading radiant life and transcendental consciousness that is the very condition and self of all beings. Unenlightened man is recoiled from surrender as the body and into the life principle. He is self-possessed, recoiled from life and even all relationships. He is unwittingly and even unconsciously the enemy of the body and all relationships and life itself. He is Narcissus, the separate one, the mind bearer. Thus, the human world remains tormented and chaotic, unable to make peace or love. And there is a deep disposition of fear in us that resists the bodily confession of life. Therefore, human beauty and vitality are always tending to be destroyed by the fear of bodily death and the inability to surrender bodily to life. The civilizations of mankind have to date embraced cultural principles that reflect the universal fear of death and all the self-possessed, self-protective and separatist strategies of conventional consciousness. In the East, the revolt against the body has produced the more or less ascetic ideals of mystical otherworldliness. In the West, that same revolt has produced the ideals of victorious manipulation of the natural realm. In both cases, the revolt and struggle against material and bodily existence is the root of all cultural adaptation. Man revolts against mortality by negatively manipulating his own body and the natural or material realm. Thus, he either separates himself from the body and the world by resorting to the illusory independence of the inner self or mind, or else he dominates the body and the world with an unillumined will to power through knowledge and conventional self-fulfillment. Even the traditional culture of the West, with its seemingly indomitable will to embrace the worldly play of nature, has associated itself historically with the ultimate otherworldly cult of Christianity, And no matter how hard Western man tries to humanize the religion and person of Jesus, the more or less ascetic, otherworldly, mystical, self-effacing, and body-denying core of that religion remains to complicate the typically self-protecting and world-exploiting tendency of Western-born individuals. Thus, the West has historically demonstrated an inherently self-divided, self-destructive, and life-denying disposition by embracing a religious ideal that is, at the root, Oriental or Eastern, and ultimately world-renouncing in its character. And conventional religion in both the East and the West has thus provided the historical basis or justification for negative cultural programs that recoil from the bodily life principle. Even so, the life principle is enshrined in the idealisms of Christianity and Judaism and Islam, and even certain dimensions of Hinduism, Buddhism, and other Oriental religious cultures. It is simply that the implications of the truly human relationship to the life principle have not been consciously acknowledged or implemented in the broad cultural programs of the traditional East or the traditional West. Thus, conventional religious culture or idealism tends to be associated with certain positive moral values, such as truthfulness, honesty, non-stealing, non-killing, and so forth. But traditional religious culture is also always associated with an ultimately negative evaluation of bodily existence and the existence of man within the realm of nature. As a result, religious acculturation, East and West, always carries with it taboos against bodily pleasure, sexual intensity, and even the will to live a long and healthful life. The time has come to transcend our ancient acculturation to the bodily negative recoil from life. We must transcend the ancient religions and the ancient cultural taboos. We must be enlightened in our understanding of the paradox of human mortality and immortality. Therefore, we must embrace life bodily and surrender into bodily communion with the living reality. We must throw away all of our bodily negative, anti-sexual, anti-life adaptations. We must realize a truly regenerative bodily love of life. It is not that we are to become libertines, but neither are we to become ascetics. We must surrender bodily to life via all our actions. We must transcend mortal fear and all of its false religious and social dogmas. We must allow life to regenerate us in every part, and we must yield to the evolutionary plan and pattern that is hidden in the body and in the play of nature, and which is not at all contained in the mind, since the mind is only a perception and presumption. We must transcend ourselves through ecstatic mind-transcending bodily love of life, or direct and whole bodily communion with the living God. Only by doing all of this can man move beyond the present impasse of worldwide conflict and subhuman idealism. We are at the dead end of the ancient ways, and we are suffering from the inability to move fully into our right human and immortal destiny. Only an enlightened and liberated understanding of our old cultural and subhuman presumptions will permit us to yield to life bodily in love and so move on in the way of God. I attest to this with every cell of my body. I affirm it with all my heart. I plead with you to consider it fully and resort to a new way of life. Da.